What do the Brewers, Cardinals, Cubs, Pirates, and Reds have that the Mariners should want this winter? We take a look at the NL Central and our divisional trade preview coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Thursday, November 9th, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. Thank you so much for making us your first listen, subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube. Or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You can now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. And you want to get on that for sure right now because we just posted our off-season plan for the Mariners over there on the Patreon. So check it out. All right. So today we're going to look at the NL Central for potential trade targets for the Mariners. And we're going to start with the Brewers because the Athletic is reporting today that the general indication coming out of the GM meetings is Milwaukee is open to trading virtually anyone on their roster. So Colby, what do the Brewers have that the Mariners should want?
Not a ton, some. Just a couple all-stars, a Cy Young finalist, and everyday middle infielder who can hit 30 home runs, just some stuff.
Right.
But
wee bit of stuff.
Yeah. There are obviously some big names here. Christian Yelich is the guy that's coming off a great year, but there are some legitimate questions, and he has a hefty contract attached to him. Devin Williams, you get a relief ace, to put with Brash and Munoz. That could be really interesting. Corbin Burns, didn't have a great year last year, but still pretty good. You only get him for a year, so doesn't seem like a route the Mariners would likely go, but maybe Willie Adames is a guy who could make some sense. Tyrone Taylor, if you're looking for kind of a fourth outfield type. There are some guys, Rowdy Tellez, who they're probably going to non-tender anyways. So there are some guys here on this team, and there are starters, there are impact players, there are bench guys, there are role players, there are bullpen arms, there are starters. It was 92-win roster last year. I think it was 92. Yeah. There's some legitimate guys. None of them are perfect fits. None of them solve all your problems. And honestly, none of them are probably the best player you should bring in this winter, but there's a lot of interesting players on the Brewers. And if they are kind of doing a fire sale rebuild, which, Ty and I kind of stumbled upon that they probably should a couple weeks ago on the Patreon show, then there are definitely some guys here who are going to make a lot of sense for the Mariners and a lot of teams in baseball.
So today I talked a little bit about the Brewers on Twitter, and the one guy that I keep getting asked about is Christian Yelich. So you mentioned him. What do you think about the Yelich situation?
It's not an immediate no, but it's probably an immediate no on that contract.
Right.
If you have to take the whole thing. So he has, pull this up real fast. He has 5 guaranteed years left. He's going to make $26 million a year, each of those years. And there is a mutual option there that includes a $6.5 million buyout. So do the math there, $136 million. And then there's deferred money that I'm not sure how you handle that. So it's a very complicated contract. He does also have a full no trade. So he's probably going to want that mutual option assured, which you really don't want to do. So if the Brewers are willing to eat a lot of that contract, and nothing really indicates that they are, the Brewers are one of those cheap teams. But Yelich is coming off of a great year. He's actually a really good fit for Seattle in terms of the bat. A lot of line drives, gap to gap, uses the whole field. Actually has a ton of home runs this year hit to left field as a left-handed hitter. So he does have opposite field power. He's a really good fit. High average, high on base, draws lots of walks, and this year the slugging return. After back-to-back sub 400 slugs this year, he slugged 447. So still a pretty good base runner. Stole 28 bags, only caught 3 times. He's a good player. Is he worth $165 million at 34 years old after 2 subpar years and 1 good year? No. So if Milwaukee's willing to eat some money, I'm interested. But it's going to have to be a pretty significant sum, I would say. And then obviously the more they eat, the higher the return would be back to Milwaukee. So yeah, a lot of pieces there, the no trade clause, the deferred money, the large contract, the mutual option, the buyout, and then just, what the Brewers actually want for Christian Yelich. So yeah, a lot of things to work through there, but in a vacuum, I'm interested. I just don't really see much of a path.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to need them to eat a very significant chunk of that money. I need to turn Christian Yelich into basically a 11 to 15-ish $1 million a year player. So that's pretty substantial there. Or I need a good amount of money of that contract eaten and a significant discount on someone like Devin Williams, Willy Adames, etc. For me to consider it. So speaking of Williams, that's the guy for me here. 29 years old. I believe he has 2 years left of club control. Yeah, 2 years left of club control. One of the best relievers in the game, has some walk issues, but also has one of the nastiest pitches in baseball in that changeup. And the Mariners need another high leverage dude. And if you want to build out one of the best bullpens in baseball, if not the best bullpen in baseball, Devin Williams is your guy. Like, you get to the 7th inning and you got like a 5-3 lead or something like that, and you're gonna throw Matt Brash, Devin Williams, and Andres Munoz in some order. Game over.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
So big on the Devin Williams idea. Also really like the Willy Adames idea, which we talked about on Mailbag Monday. The thing with that is, like, does he want to play second base? Would JP be open to playing second base for the year while you have Adames? Because that's optimally the best route, for your roster, for your lineup, is JP playing second, Adames playing short, because Adames is just a better shortstop than JP is. But very interested in that, because like you, potential there to hit like 30 home runs from Adames. And that's, again, if we're talking about adding power, making up for a lack of power at like third or first in a place that you don't typically get power out of, that's one of them right there. So if you could get like 25 to 30 home runs out of Adames, maybe you only need like 10 to 15 home runs out of a corner outfielder, or you can live with Ty France, doing what Ty France does.
Right. And also, Adames plus defensive shortstop. So, if you have to move him to second, he'll probably be fine there. It's just, you just don't pick that up right away. It takes some time.
Yeah.
And also he could play third. He definitely has the arm for third. He definitely has the athleticism for third. So yeah, there are a lot of fun things you could do with Willy Adames. Not the most CTZ player, but again, 25 home runs and plus up the middle defense. That's an interesting player. And he's only got a year left on his deal, so probably not ridiculous ask, but it's going to cost you a little something, but it won't cost you anybody in your top 5-6 prospects or anything like that.
So we're going to look at the rest of the Central. Brewers, obviously a great trade fit though for the Mariners. We're going to look at the rest of the Central. There's some other pretty decent fits for the Mariners coming up here in just a moment, but first, a reminder: this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by Jase Medical. We spend a lot of time talking together, you and I. We get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts and who sits. And I'm thankful for that connection we have. But today, I want our chat to be a little more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications. You realize what that means? Bring on extended travel. Bring on the next natural disaster supply chain issue, because you are covered, my friend. You don't have to worry anymore about whether or not you can refill your generics for Cialis, Viagra, or Revatio prescription. And this is possible because of our friends over at Jase Medical. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKDON, at checkout for a discount as well. A verified customer had this to say about Jase. Quote, "I am thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply, and I also ordered an antibiotic kit. Now I feel secure. Prices are lower than local pharmacies, and I highly recommend this for everyone. So, if you or someone you love would get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily med, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON, that's LOCKDON, $20 off your purchase. And you are listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen as we preview potential trade targets from the NL Central for the Seattle Mariners. We just talked about the Milwaukee Brewers. Now we're going to talk about the St. Louis Cardinals, who we've talked about a lot over the last few months as they've been heavily linked to the Mariners because they want young starting pitching. And the Mariners obviously have that, Bryce Miller and Brian Wu. And they have some position player depth to potentially trade from with guys like Nolan Gorman and Lars Nootbaar. We've talked about those guys ad nauseum. So we're not going to spend too much time on this team because, again, we've talked about them a lot. So I think you guys, if you've been watching the show, you get the deal. You know where our head's at pretty much with the Cardinals. But yeah, just to generally check in, Colby, what do you think about the Cardinals as a fit for the Mariners?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. Apparently, the report or the rumor is that the Cardinals are willing to talk about any of their young bats except for two. One is Jordan Walker, which okay. The other is Lars Nootbaar.
Wow.
So yeah.
Well, clearly they're going to get Ohtani because Lars Nootbaar is there.
Good player. Should never be in the realm of untouchable. But yeah, so obviously, there's some of the bigger names, Tommy Edman, Brendan Donovan, are a couple guys that always get brought up. Nolan Gorman is kind of a favorite on Mariners Twitter right now, but there are some other names. I don't know if it makes sense for their young pitching, but there are some other names that could be available. Dylan Carlson is an interesting fit in Seattle. Tyler O'Neill as a fourth outfielder, definitely improves the athleticism, defense, and base running of your ball club there with tremendous power. He's might be non-tendered. I think they'll probably tender him a contract, but he's not a guarantee. So that's a guy. There's also some dudes in the bullpen. Giovanni Gallegos makes a lot of sense. Ryan Helsley, if you want to go like super expensive with it. But yeah, I don't see Goldschmidt and Arenado as legitimate, trade targets, or even I don't think they're going to be available. So I wouldn't count them in this conversation. But yeah, it's Gorman, it's Donovan, it's Edman to a lesser extent, Carlson, O'Neill to a lesser extent. Then there's a couple guys in the bullpen that are pretty interesting. I'm not interested in Wilson Contreras. He doesn't fit this ball club. I don't really like the bat in Seattle, and $80 million for a full-time DH. No, thanks. So yeah, I think it's pretty much all the guys we've talked about. There's really nobody who's sprung up lately. I don't think that like Alec Burleson is going to have a lot of going to have the Mariners interest. He's just kind of a first base DH only bat who hasn't really hit at the big league level. So yeah, just pretty much the same guys we talked about it over the summer. Not a lot has changed there.
Yeah. So you guys know how we feel about Gorman and Edman and Donovan, etc. I'd be willing to trade Miller for two of those guys, but not one of them.
And one of them has to be Gorman.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but yeah, I mean, if they traded Miller or Wu for Gorman straight up, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I would just be kind of whelmed. Like
that's not when I think about the ideal return for Bryce Miller. That's not who I think of. That's not who first comes to mind.
No, if it's Gorman and Carlson, maybe.
All right, so the Cubbies, they have a new manager. Poor David Ross.
Talk about getting done dirty.
Yeah, man. That's brutal. Is there anything here in Chicago? I feel like to me on paper this is the worst fit of the five teams we're going to talk about today, but maybe
I would say probably Pittsburgh.
Maybe the Pirates. Yeah. Yeah. What's here in Chicago that you like for the Yams?
Well, we talked about him a lot last winter, and then we kind of assumed because he signed an extension, it wasn't available. But Ian Happ makes sense, particularly if the Cubs are really going to be very aggressive in bringing back Cody Bellinger. I think that might, leave open the possibility that Happ becomes available, and he's a nice fit. Seiya Suzuki is kind of a fun one to think about. He had a really nice year this year, and Mariner fans have been interested in the past. I don't know if the Mariners were ever really that interested, but he's an interesting one. But we're kind of unsure which direction the Cubs are going to go because they lost Stroman, they lost Bellinger. In theory, maybe they re-sign those guys, but they're now free agents. They don't really have a third baseman. So I don't know. Are they Gino Suarez for Ian Happ? Like, is that something that could happen? I don't know. Probably not. But yeah, they're not going to trade Justin Steele, but maybe Jamison Tyone is kind of an interesting guy. Kyle Hendricks on a 1-year deal, probably making a little too much money, but interesting. Christopher Morel is kind of a fun player if you're going to trade one of those young pitchers to look at. And then there's some guys, Patrick Wisdom, kind of interesting.
If they're trying to cut down on strikeouts, though, Patrick Wisdom is not their guy.
No. Your favorite guy to bring up at the trade deadline, Mike Tauchman.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you're looking for you want to take a shot on a guy like Nick Madrigal. He's pretty much run out of time there in Chicago, and he's AAA depth at this point, but a lot of contact, a lot of speed, pretty good defender, but that's about it. Some bullpen guys. Adbert Alzolay, I think is how you pronounce it. Alzolay. It's pretty interesting. But yeah, there's not a ton in the bullpen here. That makes a lot of sense. Not a ton in the rotation. But yeah, Ian Happ could be a guy. Particularly if they bring Bellinger back, and then Suzuki, maybe Chris Morel. Those are kind of the three I'm looking at.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the Cubs offseason because the indication right now is that they're going to go pretty heavy after Ohtani. I don't think they're going to get Ohtani, but they seem to be pretty interested on that front. And their roster build over the last couple of years and their approach to free agency in the off seasons, the last couple of off seasons has been weird. They haven't had a natural transition from the Bryant, Rizzo, etc. era. They've kind of tried to jumpstart another era of Cubs baseball right from the get-go rather than just outright rebuild. So I don't know. Yeah. Really intrigued by their offseason, especially now that they have Craig Counsell. All right, so the Pirates, Pittsburgh Pirates. You think this is the worst fit of the 5 teams that we're talking about today? Why is that?
Well, O'Neal Cruz sucks. We can start right there.
Right. You hate O'Neal Cruz.
I wonder, can the dude play baseball? Yeah, he could hit the ball hard and far, and he could throw the ball really hard. But can he play baseball? I don't know.
Playing baseball.
I don't know. They're certainly going to try and make him, but I don't know if he can or can't.
The things that you described are baseball actions.
Yeah, hitting a batting practice fastball 450 feet is an accolade, but when you're throwing curveballs and sliders, can you not strike out 45% of the time? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But yeah, there's just not a ton here. The Pirates are also one of those weird teams that's what are they doing? Obviously, we know they're not going to spend a ton of money, but they were okay last year. 76 and 86, certainly better than a lot of us thought they would be. But yeah, Brian Hayes is overrated. O'Neal Cruz is just bad. Brian Reynolds is, a guy that we talked a lot about last summer, and he might be available. I wouldn't say he's definitely not available just because he signed an extension. It just, not likely, I guess I would say. And then after that, I'm looking around they're not trading Mitch Keller. There's really not much else in the rotation that makes a lot of sense. Bednar, maybe, but they haven't so far, which tells me their asking price for him is massive.
I also feel like this is a team that's going to try and compete for the wild card.
Right, without spending a ton of money.
Right. But what that means is I don't think that they're going to subtract much from their major league roster.
No, not unless they're this might be why they're willing to trade Brian Reynolds though, because if they can get, Bryce Miller or Brian Wu for Brian Reynolds and save some money there, then they can go out and they can, fill holes elsewhere. They definitely need pitching. But yeah, there's just not a ton here. Connor Joe is a guy I know you like, and he's
Yeah.
interesting as a role player.
Yep.
But that's really it. Like
Yeah, if you're
Santana and
trying
McCutcheon are free
to
agents.
yeah, if you're trying to beef up your bench, Connor Joe makes some sense. He's a
Mhm.
little bit of a hedge for Ty France. He can play some corner outfield,
Yeah.
DH. So
Yeah. And no, by the way, I think somebody asked us this on Twitter the other day. Jack Sawinski, not really a fit. Strikes
I
out a
also
ton.
don't think he's getting traded.
No, I mean he strikes out a ton. Does walk a ton though. Not a great defender in center field. Does have some pop, but like I don't see it. So yeah, the Pirates are kind of this weird team where they have some stuff, but we don't know what direction they're trying to head. We know that they are financially limited. Well, their owner makes them financially limited.
Yeah.
And they just don't have a ton of like major league pieces that are going to interest Seattle, except for again, Brian Reynolds. So
Right.
if there's an opportunity, and we know Seattle likes Brian Reynolds, but they also weren't willing to trade Bryce Miller for him last year. So why would that change when Reynolds had kind of a year? Probably doesn't. So I just don't see a lot here.
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen as we dive through the NL Central for potential trade targets for the Seattle Mariners. And lastly on our list today, the Cincinnati Reds, who the Mariners have made a billion trades with for the last couple of years. Some very, very big trades for both of these teams. And both of these teams are in a much better spot because of them, I believe. I think both of these teams have really benefited from those trades. So is there another one that could potentially be in the work here, Colby? What do you think about the Reds as a fit?
Sure, but it's not for Ellie De La Cruz. He kind of sucks. Very O'Neill Cruz. Throw the ball a mile, hit the ball a mile. Can he actually hit though?
You
But
hate the athletes. You hate just the amazing
I like
athletes.
athletes who are good at baseball more so than
De,
just
De La
athletes.
Cruz was actually like pretty bad this year. Like overall,
Yeah,
when you look back on his
he
numbers, like
did not live up to the hype.
84 WRC plus. Like he got off to a great start, but 84
He did.
WRC plus to finish
The
the
league
year.
pretty quickly figured him out. So
Yeah.
He's just again. I like players who are athletes who are good at baseball,
Sure.
not just athletes who play baseball. But no, Ellie De La Cruz is fun to watch. I mean, there's no denying that.
Yeah.
No, when he's playing,
he's cool. He's cool.
Yeah, he's a fun player. But he's obviously not going to get traded. Aside from him, though, I mean, you could pretty much pick a guy in the Red who played a lot for the Reds lineup this year, and he makes some form of sense for the Mariners. You look at Spencer Steer, he makes some sense. You look at Jonathan India. We know the Mariners have they've liked him in the past. Probably not as much as a lot of people want or believe that they do, but there's some interest there. Noel V. Marte is an interesting guy if you're trying to trade some pitching. Jake Fraley is an interesting role player, particularly as a part of a platoon. TJ Friedel is an interesting guy. He could be your leadoff hitter, play center field. Well, you play left for you, but there are some, and then Encarnacion Strand, and like there are some legitimate guys on this team that make a lot of sense, and they desperately need starting pitching, starting pitching, because we know Cincinnati's a little bit on the cheap side. So there is definitely a natural fit here, and there are several avenues that Seattle could take to get one of these bats that could make a lot of sense for their lineup. Are any of them like the ideal fit for specifically Miller? I mean, like if you could get Matt McLean, but I don't think you can. So you kind of have to, work around some things. There's not like a super plain obvious fit, but I look at Encarnacion Strand, I look at Steer, I look at Noelvi, I look at Fraley, I look at Friedel, I look at Will Benson a little bit. Like there's some legitimate guys who I think can hit a little bit here. And I think they make some sense for Seattle. And what if you give up Bryce Miller and you get Spencer Steer and Diaz out of that bullpen or something like that? Like maybe. So the Reds are actually, I think, a pretty good fit.
I didn't know that was actually Edwin Diaz's brother till last year. Yeah. That's crazy. That's really dude. That family produces some really good relievers.
They throw the ball hard. That is for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I look, the Reds have a logjam there in their infield. They got to figure that out a little bit. They've already made some progress on that with what are they didn't pick up the option on Joey Votto. So, they have Noelvi there. Noelvi had a pretty good year overall, so he's probably someone that they want getting quite a bit of playing time. I feel like the odd man out here is Jonathan India, and India's now only has 3 years left of club control. He's ARB eligible now. He's not a particularly good defender, at least by outs above average standards. I know we had some Reds fans that came into our comments during the summer that said, no, he's a bit better than that. I don't know. I haven't watched him play, but outs above average say that he's terrible. But again, talking about adding power at a position that you don't typically get power at, he does have some power. He does have some over the wall power, so that would be nice to add. On top of that, he doesn't really strike out that much. He has pretty good feel for the strike zone. There's definitely a fit there. It's just I'm not trading Bryce Miller for him. I'm not even trading Brian Wu for him. Like for me, that's probably prospects or like prospects plus a reliever or something like that. That's kind of the type of return that I'm thinking of for India. If they're asking for Brian Wu or Bryce Miller, I'm probably laughing at them.
Yep,
So
laugh them off the phone.
Yeah. Now, if they want to talk,
to continue laughing.
Yeah. Now, if they want to talk India and Spencer Steer,
yep.
Like, all right, we can talk.
Right.
Like,
I mean, India and Encarnacion Strand, even like, okay, like I'd prefer somebody, like again, there are some, but I think Friedel is the guy that you might trade Miller for straight up, like if necessary. But Friedel has some splits issues, and it is interesting when at the very beginning of the offseason, the Mariners offseason, I don't know if you remember this, Ty, I sent out a poll that was Bryce Miller for Spencer Steer. And a bunch of people said they didn't want Cincinnati hitters because Great American Ballpark is a bandbox. And like these guys always fail when they come to Seattle, ignoring, of course, the great year that Gino had just last year, but whatever. And by the way, it's not like Jesse Winker went back to a really good hitter's park and he still sucked. So, but keep in mind, Spencer Steer had better numbers on the road than he did at the Great American Ballpark. So try again. But there are some legitimate things with Steer, like where the heck does he play? Because he's really not good at any of them. So, but yeah, Steer is kind of the guy. Benson is really interesting. He's 25, 26, had a great year. There's some upside there, but yeah, like I do wonder, like, would you trade Miller for like Noelvi Marte and Jonathan India? Maybe you consider it because you do have a third base spot that you're trying to fill pretty soon. Yeah, Cincinnati makes a lot of sense. There are a lot of really interesting players in Cincinnati, and I honestly, like, not hyperbole, you might be able to get like India for like Emerson Hancock and Jonathan Clase or Tyler Locklear or something like that. Like it's not going to cost a ton. And if it does, again, if a team wants to outbid you, okay, goodbye. Josh Rojas is better than Jonathan India. That's not even really like an argument. He is. India maybe has more upside, but Rojas is better right now. So I don't need Jonathan India. I'd like Jonathan India, but I don't need him.
Sure. Yeah. So I think of all the divisions that we've talked about during this series, and including the NL East, who we're going to look at tomorrow, this is probably the best fit.
Yep.
For the Mariners. I mean, Brewers have a lot of guys. Cardinals have a lot of guys. Reds have quite a few guys. Cubs and Pirates, there's some pieces there that could be of interest. So, a lot of possibilities here in the NL Central. Would be pretty surprised if Mariners didn't make a trade with this division in some capacity this winter.
Sure.
So, all right, that's going to do it for us. Question of the day for you guys: which of these players that we talked about or didn't talk about today would you like the most on the Mariners in 2024? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dan Gonzalez, that's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.